Hello velomobile fans! Today the work I'm doing on the cedar strip wah is to finish up the wiring. Most of it I left intact when I started the rebuild, and I will leave most of it intact, but I do kind of need to rewire the front because I did disconnect those when I put in a new nose, which, by the way, the new nose now has 3 coats of clear coat on it. Not entirely happy with the sheen on the front, but oh well. I also got some Velcro here around the manhole, or not the manhole, service hatch opening, and I put this window sealant stuff around the edge to try to keep some water out. But anyway, back to the wiring. Here is my wiring diagram that I drew up when I first wired up the cedar strip wah. And I'll kind of walk you through this so you maybe have an understanding of what I'm doing. There's 2 important things to consider when you're doing wiring, and that is that power has to come in and power has to go out. And it's got to run in a circle, as my dad used to tell me. The power comes initially from this battery. In this case, it's I'm using a different battery. I'm using an 11.1 volt one that came off of the came with the Quest. I stopped using it because there was a problem with the connector, and I hadn't sourced new connectors yet. So the power is going to come out, and it's going to first go through a fuse, and that fuse just protects things from blowing in the circuit. It's a 5 amp fuse, and the fuse sits in this little connector here, and then you can see that the red and black wires running in through that fuse aren't connected to anything. Those will get connected to the battery. From there, it next runs into, or at least initially it did, it ran into this handlebar controller. It had a high and a low beam on the headlights, which I was actually using as an off and an on, and then it has the left and right turn signal and the horn. I'm going to add in some additional features this time around, and I'm not going to use the headlight switch, at least initially, but I'll keep the turn signals, and then I'm going to add in some new switches, and those are going up in here. I've got a main power switch because the battery I'm using doesn't have an on and off. This will be for probably for the flashers. This will be for the running lights, and this will be for the headlights. You can also see that there are 4 small LED lights in here. Those are from before. I had the left turn signal, right turn signal. I believe this was maybe the headlight, so maybe I'll make that the headlight switch. And this was just to remind me that the brake light is on, or that so I can see that it's working. I did those instead of putting a beeping type unit because sound annoys me. And this way I just have a visual that they're on. So when we're routing the power, what initially I had done was I routed the power here into the switch. There's a wire that brings the power in here, and from there there's separate wires that went out to the headlight, the turn signals, and the horn. And you can see the power goes in here to the horn, in here to the headlight, but it doesn't do that to the turn signals because we need a flasher relay. So the power goes first into that flasher relay, which is this black box here in its poor, sad, dusty state. And then from there, that brings the power here into this handlebar switch. And then that power goes out to a right turn signal and to a left turn signal. And then that just runs to whatever LEDs are for those turn signals. The same happens with the horn. There's the wire into the switch, the wire out of the switch to the horn, which got torn off here. And then the headlight switch did the same thing. Power into the headlight switch, and the power runs out to the headlight. Then from each of those lights, there is a black wire that's going to be the common return, or the ground it's often called. And that's going to run back to just a common black wire. All of these get connected into the same black wire, and that runs back to the battery. There's also a brake light, which is wired through these brake light handles, the brake handles. And you can see that there is a wire that runs a long ways, and that wire has, I believe, the black and the red again, and that wire I won't need to mess with because that's already wired up. But there's the power into the brakes, and then there's the power that comes out of the brakes that goes to a large light bar on my poor sad tail. This large bar down at the bottom is my brake light, super bright, perfect for that. There's the turn signal lights that are on there right now, and these three I was using as running lights. The running lights were, I think, maybe also running off the headlight switch. Here's my tail light. It looks like I had the tail light, yes, run with the headlight. I need to check that and see how that's wired right now, because what I'm going to do is, I mentioned adding in running lights and flashers. I'm going to add a couple of more lights to the tail that'll probably get mounted right about here, and those will be set to flash by adding in another relay. I have a second one that I set around here someplace. It's up here. And then I'll take these two lights that were on the back of the Quest, and I'll run those as flashers in the rear. And then on the original nose, I have lots and lots and lots of lights. It was a very well lit nose. I had the headlight, and then I had these set of lights. I'm going to replace the turn signals with some LED strips, but I will take probably 3 of the lights from each side here, and I'll put them on the nose with some probably 3 running lights and maybe 3 flashing lights or something. I still haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do that part, but that's something to think about in the next few minutes. So that's what I'll be doing. I always solder my wires. Some people use like crimp-on type connectors or something. I'm old school. I don't mind doing a little bit of soldering, so I'm going to solder mine together, and let's see how it goes. Wiring update. I have had a terrible time with the lights in front that I'm trying to run as flashers. I had these on the front of the former nose, just a couple of white lights. The Amazon page says that black is positive and white is negative, but that's not correct. It's actually the other way around, and that was helpful to discover because I've wired and rewired these multiple times. But they work now, so I'm going to solder them together and get them tucked back inside and stuff. Operation Rewire and improve the lighting in the velomobile is more or less complete. The only thing I have left to do is just to put the headlight in its final place. But anyway, here's what I've got going on. We'll get a little extra light in here. So the power runs from the battery through the fuse, and then it runs up into one of these switches. The middle is the power in, and then the outer red is the power out, and then there's a black wire that runs to the return. So power on for the system. Then from there, the power runs into each of the switches, and it also runs through this very complicated pigtail that's probably more complicated than it needs to be, but it runs to the brakes, it runs to the flashers, and into this handlebar. Right now, the only thing being used from the handlebar is the horn and the turn signals, and that's where all of the power runs. And then from each of the switches, there's a red wire, the top wire, that runs out and will run to the various lights. And then there's a black wire, and that all gets wired back into the return. So the turn signals, that is the left-hand turn signal. There's the front turn signal. And then there's the rear turn signal, relatively bright. And then we've got our right turn signal, which is going the other way on the switch. Oh, and it also has got a light there. The power runs from here into the light, and then from there it runs out to the turn signals. There's the left turn signal. I will properly attach these once I put the final 5th coat of clear coat on. I haven't done that yet. And then of course there's the right turn signal in the rear as well. Then there is the horn. I do need to cut the hole for the horn yet, but that's this button. Loud and annoying. This switch is not yet hooked up. I'm waiting for a Bush & Müller IQX something or other. It's one that has both a high and a low beam, so I haven't activated that yet. And then this is for the running lights. Those are solid lights. Got nice, relatively bright LEDs in the back for that. And then the other end runs to one of the headlights. That headlight will get mounted in this hole in the front. It does have a rather surprised looking face right now. And then the other switch is the one that I just spent a considerable amount of time troubleshooting. The lights in the back have a white wire and a black wire. And in the back, the white wire, well, that's not quite right. What went wrong with that? They were flashing before, and now they are not flashing. And they're running very dim. I wired something wrong. I had it right a moment ago. I'm gonna have to troubleshoot that again. Those lights have been nothing but trouble. They come on briefly. Now let's see if I just did a little flasher thingy. There we go. Now they're working. Okay, so interestingly, there's still a little bit of light in the back when they're not flashing. I'm not sure why that is, because I don't believe the front ones do that. They do not. They are quite bright. Maybe not quite as blinding as, well, I don't know, they're pretty bright. I have some hideaway lights on the Quest that are tremendously bright. These rear ones don't seem to be quite that insane. But anyway, in the back, the white wire was the negative and the black wire was the positive. but the ones in the front, it turned out were the opposite way. And I don't know why that is, because that's not what the instructions say. But anyway, from every light, there's a power in. Usually it's a red, sometimes it's a white, and apparently sometimes it's a black. And then there's a power out. And the power out, all of those blacks eventually get connected together, and then they just run back eventually to the battery. There's the black from the back, this is the black from the front. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about the wiring. It's once you understand that there's an in and an out, and that the power's got to flow in a circle, then it's not so bad to do the wiring. And in my previous video, I walked you through my diagram. There's the diagram again, and I don't have any sort of resistors or anything in there that complicates things, like the professional ones from Romania.